Good morning, good morning. Come on in, let's have a seat. So I've been following on social media, on Instagram, a guy who he teaches all sorts of different tie knots and then pocket squares, how to do them in different ways. And I'm like, you know what? It's just been, for one, he's got a fun accent. I think he might be British, at least British leaning, but he's got a fun accent to describe this, does it in 60 seconds. And it gives me a lot of fun things to look at going, ooh, I wonder if I could try that. So no, I did not try anything special with the tie, but I've been having more and more fun with pocket squares. But what I've learned is if you don't do it right, pocket square decides to try to hide. And so I'm going to use that as my timer, that if the pocket square is fully disappeared, that means it's time for me to quit talking. But if it stays up, then it must be okay. Is that fair? Probably not. Okay. So, yeah, you can come up here and push it down and say, it's time. No. Oh, what a morning. Not only does rain slow people down, but also Potluck Sunday. I remember growing up, I think there was one time that we were on time for church during a Potluck Sunday. And we were always early. But man, I remember it's just hard to get the food and the kids and everything ready, including yourself. But it is such a joy, and I'm glad that we do this as a congregation. I was a little afraid coming here, to be completely honest. Most of you know I grew up in small churches. And I came from a small church right before I came here. And one thing that most every small church I've ever been a part of, it doesn't matter, I was a part of one with about 40 members, up to 200. I'll consider those small churches. Every one of those churches had good potlucks. I mean, it was amazing. And then I'd go to larger churches, and I would be a little underwhelmed by their potluck. I'm like, we have more people that should have like more awesomeness. And it'd be like, yeah, it's all right. Well, I have to say, there may have been a little bit of a time at Western Heights, here's a couple potlucks that you're like, yeah, it's a big church. But man, recently, these potlucks have been phenomenal. And so if you weren't planning on staying around for the congregational potluck today, I highly recommend that you do such. It will bless your soul because it's good soul food. And there's a lot of wonderful things with that. So that's me just reminding you of a thing. And if you did not remember that it's potluck and feel bad showing up not bringing anything, that's all right. You can have my portion. I will find other food if I need, just so that we can all enjoy this together. It'll be a blast of a time. So show up, and we would love to have you there. Now, it's not only, Walt, you can't have my portion. No. What was that? Have we ever run out of food? Yes. Well, the only reason I know, we've ran out of a good chunk of things at one potluck, and then the next one we corrected our mistake. So, yeah. Well, if you come to the last of the line, you might find it, but it's all right. Like, that's kind of the joy of this is the joy of potlucks is you never know what you're going to get, and you don't have the author of this meal standing right there to where you can ask, hey, what is this exactly? You just have to go, in faith, I'm going to try it, and I've been blessed by a lot of faith trials. All right, it's also we're going to dive into class now with one announcement. Another announcement is, as you might know, it's Super Bowl Sunday. You may not know that, and that's okay. But even though it's Super Bowl Sunday, I'm going to start off with a question. I'm going to start off with a question from baseball. So some of you may go, oh, good. It's a better sport anyway. All right, that's fine. Baseball pitchers and catchers, they report 2 weeks, I think is right. So baseball season's coming again. Let me ask this question about baseball. What are some of your favorite walk-up songs? As you think about, like, if you don't know what a walk-up song is, if you've ever watched baseball, and not just professional, when Zoe would play, whenever she played for a season with this adaptive league that they had, they asked us all to give a song that could be their walk-up music, and it's as you're walking up to the plate, you have that music playing. What is some of your favorites, if you can think of any that you've heard? Wild Thing? Did anyone specifically use that you can think of, or just, yeah? That's a good one. What else? Yeah, so my wife and I are fans of Crazy Train because a particular player on the Braves that would do that every time, and it was like, yes, good old Chipper Jones. And it's just a good one. Feels right. What else? So let me ask this. So apparently not as strong baseball fans in here, which is all right. Let me ask this. What's the purpose of a walk-up song? Sometimes intimidation. Correct. Okay, so Paula's thinking of a movie, Here Comes the Boom, that it's about intimidation. So that's definitely part of it. What other purposes for the walk-up song? Yeah, it's meant to be that, that walk-up music. For a while it was a thing that people coming on the stage for various events, they would have a little, some music as they're walking up, to borrow it from the baseball world, and I was like, oh man, what would be my preaching moment walk-up song? You know what? And some of you, you're like, no, Mitch, no, don't do that. But there's something about the hype that your favorite kind of song, or that puts you in that moment, that as you're going to the thing that you're going to do, you just have that kind of music and that motivation, and it sits there with you. And I think there's some neat things about that idea, that a lot of times we understand the power of music, I believe, but sometimes we forget how many places it can be used. Yes, sir.
One thing you got me thinking about is, to tie it back in biblically, when they would walk to the temple, they would Jubilee, they would be singing songs to kind of focus on the event that's coming up.
That is right. So, right in purpose for what we're looking at today. So, you saw my notes probably. This is great. So, mention what is your name? Michael. So Michael mentioned about that going to the temple to worship. It wasn't just go there and then worship. It was they would have walk-up music to worship, and it's really cool with that. Now, we've been looking in the Psalms in this class, and many of the Psalms have a heading before a lot of the chapters. That heading is not typically in Scripture, but is there added later as information about the psalm or to help. So if you were to look at Psalm 120 to 134, every one of those psalms has a portion of it that says something to the effect of a song of ascents. And a song of ascents, it's the idea behind these psalms, at least one explanation, is as the pilgrims, or as any worshiper was heading towards Jerusalem for a feast, for anything, coming to the temple there in Jerusalem and all of that, as they were going, this was their songbook. And there's actually strong traditions that show that they would sing through Psalms 120 through 134 on their way up to Jerusalem. And also it's the Psalms of Ascent going up to Jerusalem. Everyone went up to Jerusalem. Doesn't matter if it's north, south, east, or west that you're coming from. Because Jerusalem was about 2,000 feet higher than the surrounding plain. And so no matter which direction you were coming from, you were going up to Jerusalem. And so as you were going up, you were singing these walk-up songs, and they were preparing you for what would happen when you got there. And I find that wonderful. In fact, a lot of times I will sit and just read through these Psalms as some reminders, some hype, some walk-up music, as it were, for myself. So we're going to be looking at these Psalms. If you want to turn to Psalm 121. Yes, Walt? Yeah. Most of them. So I can tell you what music it was. It wasn't like what we see. Music was different then, definitely. You know, if you've ever heard Gregorian chant, that is well after this even. And so Gregorian chant is what started. Here's my music history class, Katie. Gregorian chant started our modern understanding of music. But music preceded that. Obviously, David played the harp. There were different things. We don't know tons of exactly how it worked musically, but we know that there was music, and it was maybe similar to some things that we can recognize today. But I think if we were to hear it, we may have to go, oh, that's a song. You know, it may feel different for us than it would them, for sure. So Psalm 121. We're going to hit several Psalms this morning, so kind of rapid fire, but a lot of Psalms of Ascent. Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither sleep or slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at the right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. I want to start with a different question than what I've normally been starting with in this class about these Psalms, about what do you feel from this Psalm. I want to put it first to this. If you were going to use this Psalm as a prayer, it's praying this Psalm. If you were going to use this Psalm as a prayer, what might be the occasion or the prompt of you using this as a prayer? For you personally, not them. If you were to use this Psalm as a prayer, what would you think would be a good prompt for that, an occasion that you were about to do or anything to that effect? Okay, so yeah, if you were literally traveling to Jerusalem, this would seem like a good prompt, okay? But since most of us aren't traveling to Jerusalem, what would be a good prompt for this week? What was that? So give me something. Pretty much anything, give me something. Regular daily life, give me something more. Like I'm asking some specifics. Ice on the sidewalk, John says. Why would you say that, John? Will not let your foot slip. Okay. John's surgery went well from that, but yeah, so that would be, here's the thing. When you're traveling and you know that the travel is a little bit dangerous, there's actually we'll have another psalm that will hit more into that for sure. But just when you're traveling, isn't that kind of a huge part? What else? Okay, some health difficulties when you're facing that. When you feel that you are in the valley and you look up and say, I lift my eyes to those mountains, because where does my help come from? So in a sense, they're looking like them, they are looking at Jerusalem, and they are considering God who dwells in this temple, much more than the temple, but they're considering that, and they're definitely looking at that. But sometimes what we end up looking at is whenever we look at the mountains, there's a lot of things that we can see with mountains, can understand with mountains. You can see them as imposing forces. So whenever I look at all the imposing forces that are against me, where does my help come from? Not from them. My help comes from the Lord. And it could be that whenever I'm looking at these mountains, I'm seeing all the help that people can give me. So going back to the health situations, I can look at the mountains of saying, man, I'm glad I have good doctors and nurses and care. But that's not where my true help comes from. My help comes from the Lord. So it's a good reminder in a lot of that. Yes, sir.
We have a lot of self-help type stuff in our world.
Right?
I think this is the OG. I think this is the original self-help. But the difference is this includes God.
Okay.
Whereas it's not about me self-helping myself. This is obviously has to do with giving credit where credit is due, allowing this power to actually flow through you.
All right. So in contrast to a lot of how self-help books and advice is now, where it's truly you and yourself, you can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps idea, this psalm is saying, look, you got to lift your eyes up. You got some self-help involved, but every bit of this is pointing to the maker of heaven and earth. He's the one that's going to help you on this journey. He's the one that's not going to let your foot slip. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't slumber. He doesn't take a nap. Do you hear a little bit of the Elijah on Mount Carmel with the prophets of Baal in there? Oh, maybe Baal is just relieving himself. Maybe he's taking a nap. You just need to shout louder and wake him up. David's commenting on that. Our God doesn't sleep. What else you feel from this passage?
I look at it like you're recentering when you're in the midst of the storm.
Okay.
Instead of looking at the circumstances of the hurricane that's going around you, you can recenter and focus on God.
All right, recenter and focus on God. That's right, no matter what's going on. How does this psalm prepare someone for worship? In what ways? If it's a psalm of ascent, they were singing it on their way to Jerusalem to worship, and it's using it as a worship song, but it is also preparing for worship. How would this bless you if you read it before you came to church?
Because they're leaving all their troubles behind. They're coming from wherever they're coming. They're going to be in the right focus. They have to get rid of all these things.
All right, so the leaving the troubles behind, or at least pointing their eyes in the right direction and the right kind of focus that they're having. That's right. Same is true for us, isn't it? What else? How else would this psalm prepare you for worship?
It refocuses your heart.
Okay. So this focus on the Lord and making sure your heart is with Him, especially looking at 5 and 6, just resting in the Lord, right? Resting in His power, that He's watching over you, that He is no harm is going to happen to you, at least not in the traditional sense of harm or spiritual sense of harm. I like that last verse there. What is it saying to you? It's always there. So it's not just when I'm ascending to Jerusalem. It's whenever I'm descending from Jerusalem, going back to the troubles of my everyday life. This psalm is reminding us that as we come to worship, God's with us and has our focus. And as we leave, we should never leave His focus, our eyes upon Him. He doesn't leave us. But a lot of times what we do is whenever we leave God behind. But God wants to be a part of the journey both to Jerusalem and from Jerusalem. All right, let's look at another Psalm. 122, very next one. I rejoice with those who said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Our feet are standing in your gates, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built like a city that is closely compacted together. That is where the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, to praise the name of the Lord according to the statute given to Israel. There stand the thrones for judgment, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. May there be peace within your walls and security within your citadels. For the sake of my family and friends, I will say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your prosperity. What would you say is the general feeling of this psalm? What's going on here? What is the psalmist conveying? What is he feeling? All right, I'll give you a hint. Look at the second word. All right, there's joy here, right? So this psalm is based within a feeling of joy, rejoicing, joy. So it seems like that's what he's feeling. Why is he feeling joy? They made it. Made it where? So in our language, on the way, like, we're going to the house of the Lord. We're going to meet with the saints. We're going to church. Even though, you know, the song, you can't go to church because the church is you. Okay, I get that. But there's a level in which he's right on. I was glad when they said to me, let's go to church. Now, is that still true? Like, if we were to poll the congregation, and not just the congregation here that shows up, let's say all those who consider themselves members or even loosely affiliated with Western Heights, if they were to go to any church, it would be Western Heights. Do you think they would honestly say, yes, I agree with this passage? As a general rule. Give me a percentage of people that just you think would say, yeah, I agree with that. I rejoice. I have joy whenever I come physically to the fellowship of the saints. 10% actually think that, or 10% don't? Okay. Okay. What else do you think? I mean, have you spent much time thinking about the joy of others when they come to fellowship together? Maybe that's our issue. Maybe we can't really put a percentage on this is because we've never really thought about someone else's joy when we come to fellowship together. What's the problem in that? David? Okay. The alternative is we're focused on me. And I can tell you without much hesitation that the predominant focus, even in church services, the predominant focus is selfish. We are concerned about what I can get out of it. We are concerned about what I'm going to receive whenever I leave from this place, the uplifting that I might get. Oh, it's this song leader this month. Oh, I like this sermon series that Mitch is doing. Or alternative, oh, I wish Mitch would move on from this series. He's wearing me out. It's tiring. And I'm having to drudge myself to come to worship because I don't get much out of it. What is this psalm saying to that kind of mentality? It's not what you get, it's what you bring. They were excited about going to worship, and it's not simply, continue in the context, it's not just because, ooh, we're worshiping God, and God's so amazing. That's wonderful, and that's definitely part of it. But if you go, it's Jerusalem, which is a city built closely compacted together, which is kind of a weird phrasing, but the idea is its people are together. This is where all the tribes, this is again, people go. This is the gathering place. And it is a joy to gather in the place with people who want to worship the Lord. And the only way it becomes a joy to gather in that kind of place is whenever it is a joy for me to make sure it's a joy for you, and a joy for you to make sure it's a joy for me. And then we have mutual edification going on. New Testament talks about this often, but here's a wonderful psalm about that kind of idea. I'll take us to the end of the psalm, and then I'll back up if anyone wants to back up and bring up anything through the middle. Verses 8 and 9. For the sake of my family and friends, I will say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of the Lord, I will seek your prosperity. What do you think is going on here? What is he saying? So praying for some unity of the body, definitely. There's peace within you. We get that, right? It's this focus on your peace, and we want you to have peace, but it's interesting, he says, for the sake of my family and friends, for the sake of me and my circle, I'm going to say to you, peace be within you. Why is that so powerful? Why is that so effective? And maybe to add to that, why don't we do it enough? What is it about helping someone else that gives you some peace? What is that? Why does that work? Anyone got some words to be able to put into, because I know it does. All right. Takes the focus off yourself. And whenever it does that, it kind of creates room even for someone else to focus in on you. But you sometimes see, well, your troubles aren't as bad as you thought. Agreed. Agreed. So our purpose is to worship. Our purpose is to bring peace. Like there's plenty of these types of things. And so when we understand our purpose, we understand what we can bring to a situation. So, and that's a lot of it is sometimes we feel, I don't have anything to bring. I'm not, I don't have, I'm seeing two song leaders right here, so I don't have Bruce's voice, and I don't have Neil's ability for leading singing, so what good can I do for the worship service of this church if I can't stand up and lead singing? Let me tell you, you can do a lot. Here's the most simple thing that you can do. You can smile at someone because you're bringing joy into their life by just acknowledging their existence and saying, I love you in various forms. That's what we can bring because that's what we are called to bring is peace and unity. Any other thoughts from this psalm before we move on to the next? Okay, some edification on the body of Christ for sure. Yes, Don. Okay. Right. Yes. So in some of our in our efforts to really tell people to not be so self-centered, we've almost told them that, well, you just can't have any kind of desire or focus on yourself. And that's not necessarily true, because we need to love the Lord our God with all, our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love our neighbor as ourself. Ourself is part of this love also that is very much part of it. We as a society struggle with too much love for ourselves. And so that's reason we push against that so much. But we should not neglect that. That definitely speaks into all of this as well. Neil? Yeah. Agreed. Like there's all sorts of ways to be involved like that. Neil was saying, just if you're up front and you see someone smiling back, that's huge encouragement. I tell you this, like I go to different conferences and different things, and I'm around some African American preachers. And one of the first things that they do when they start, especially whenever I'm at a conference of more Caucasian people, they have to start by saying, it's okay to talk back to me. Like they have to communicate that. And the reason I bring that up is because in a few weeks, a good friend of mine is going to be coming. Some of you know Clifton Boyd. And Clifton is a good friend and a very powerful speaker and phenomenal voice. So we may ask him to lead a song just for the fun of it, because, man, if you've never heard him lead singing, he's so good. But he's going to be preaching. And he typically preaches in African American context. And so I would encourage you to encourage him by not just sitting there during his sermon, to respond and respond in kind, because I know that is part of that style. And it's also very encouraging. It's a mutual connection. I wish we did that more in Caucasian churches, because it is really encouraging no matter your skin color. But
Mm-hmm. But I think when we come together, this says for the sake of my family and friends, he's talking about for their sake, we're going to have peace. I think they're laying all their conflicts and hang-ups aside when they come together.
right.
So just when this period of time, our conflicts don't mean anything. We're here to worship the Lord. The conflicts and our petty things that are going on with our family members and all that stuff can just be put aside.
Yeah, that's great. Is that there is a time and a place to address the conflicts and the issues and things like that, but there's also a time to say, you know what, we're not going to address that right now. We're going to gather and we're going to worship together, and there's going to be peace in this situation, and peace for us both. And if we need to address that, we're going to address it now from the stance of peace through worship, and that's going to help us address the conflict even better. So yeah, great point there. All right, 126, Psalm 126, a few pages later. Sorry, a few chapters later. It may not be many pages if you actually have one of those old paper Bibles. One day that it won't be old. Psalm 126, when the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. Restore our fortunes, Lord, like streams in the Negev. Those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying seed to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them. If you know enough about Jewish history, Old Testament history, what might this psalm be referring to? Okay, so one of the times, at least, of returning from captivity. And I'm honestly not sure if this psalm was written in response directly to one event, but it seems to encapsulate that event that even happens over and over, is when we return out from captivity. And boy, that's a formative part of, and a very important part of Jewish history, but not just Jewish history, human history. Like, who among us can't say that at one point we were captive to sin? And then what a joy it is to come back and to be restored back. You know, kind of that language of how we were lost and now found. And how many times does this one psalm express this idea of filled with joy? Songs of joy. So much within there. So, what else do you see in this psalm? I'm going to tie all these together here in a little bit, but what else do you see in this one psalm? John?
It's like he wants to show off to the other nations that he has favor on Israel and make that desert land a forest.
All right, so a little bit of this idea of God showing off. Sounds strange, but we have a lot of places in Scripture in which God does things just to show His glory. Like we even have that understanding of the church itself, that angels were amazed at God showing off in this way to establish the thing called the church. And so you see that, and especially, I guess it's on the next slide, isn't it, about the Negev? So restore our fortunes, Lord, like streams in the Negev. So the Negev is this desert region, and if you've ever been in desert areas, places that are truly classified as desert, they still get rain. And when they do, it is one of the most amazing sights. I mean, it's just incredible because all of a sudden this arid, dry, brown land, after a rain, and it doesn't even have to be tons. It can just be a, quarter inch, half inch. They get some rain, and then all of a sudden, everything looks new. And it's awe-inspiring to go to a desert right after the rain. It's amazing. And thinking on that, they lived in some fertile land, but also some land that was budded up and right next to some very unfertile land, some very strong deserts. And so that picture is really strong. What else you see in this?
It's a point towards the Sermon on the Mount. I think you could argue that those who sow with tears will reap the songs of joy. The meek.
Yeah.
Jesus talks about the meek. See a little bit of that.
Definitely. So you kind of wonder if when Jesus was preaching the Sermon on the Mount, obviously he knows the Scripture, and wonder if that's part of what he had in mind of those who go out weeping, verse 5, those who sow with tears will reap with joy, with songs of joy. There's that kind of connection of blessed are those, and several of those. One more psalm, and then we'll tie them all together. Psalm 133, probably one of my favorite psalms. How good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. It is like precious oil poured on the head, running down on the beard, running down on Aaron's beard, down the collar of his robe. It is as if the dew of Mount Hermon were falling on Mount Zion, for there the Lord bestows his blessing, even life evermore. What is the main point of this psalm? Like, what's he stressing here? What does the psalmist want? Unity. Yeah, the psalmist is like, man, unity is that important. Have you noticed some progression in these psalms? I'm just picking a few, but I think there's progression in the Psalms of Ascent. So, Psalm 121, we're going to pray for our journey as we're going to the mountain to worship. I'm going to lift my eyes up. Where does my help come from? I'm going to pray for the journey. On Psalm 122, that how good and pleasing it is. No, that's I had joy, rejoiced when the people said, let us go to the house of Lord to worship. So this joy coming to worship. So first is prayer for the journey, then this joy for worship, and then there's this joy in returning from exile. Again, so part of the journey, but I'm returning from exile. I'm glad that they said, let's go. Now we're going. I'm returning from here. And when we return, we're coming from all different walks of life. We're coming from all different peoples. But we are all coming together in such a place of unity. And man, how good and pleasant it is. How amazing it is that me coming from 7-day travel from the south and you coming from a 4-day travel on the north and this person coming from a 2-day travel on the east, and yeah, that would work, and then this person coming a 2-minute travel, all coming together. And it doesn't matter how far you've traveled then, we're here together. John?
I wonder if those tribes were all different tribes of people, like black, white, brown, yellow.
What tribes? Tribes mentioned here?
Yes. I wonder if they were all the same looking people or if they were different.
I think for a general case of Old Testament understanding, whenever it talks about tribes, it is talking about the 12 tribes that would be fairly exclusive in the way that they looked, because that's what genes do. And when you all come from one person, it's how your genes are going to go. But I think the spiritual point is much bigger. So now, on the other side, I don't think that the psalm is limited to just saying, oh, it's Jews when we gather together, because also proselytes were among them and others. They wouldn't be considered tribes for that purpose, but there are others that are with. But now in the spiritual context, that unity that we all have needs to be a unity of all. That everyone is welcome to the Lord's church. And if we ever find ourselves standing as gatekeepers of the Lord's church, we're messing it up, because it's not our job to gatekeep. It's our job to come and find joy together in the worship of the one and only with the saints. There's plenty more in the Psalms of Ascent, but maybe we've whet your appetite a little bit to just read through these and be encouraged and be blessed. But I do think one of the things I want you to look at is, if you're looking, so it's Psalm 120 through 134. So if you go and read them just straight, you might sense this movement that I think they were put in this order for a reason. So check that out, and we'll continue next time. We'll begin worship here in 15 minutes.